This is a game I played recently with the black pieces. Blitz game, 2 minutes with a second on each move. Let's see what happened here. My opponent played e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight to c3, knight to c6, bishop c4, e6, bishop e3. Let me just see how far. Okay, it's a6. Still opening theory. Bishop e3. Well, bishop e3 avoids two things, queen c7 and b5, I suppose. Okay, it's an opening theory, so here I played bishop e7. He played queen e2. Queen e2 allows long castle, obviously. But it also, well, it kind of delays castling as well. For example, if white ever decides to go short, he has the option to do that because there's no rush to castle anyway. Here I went out of book with h5 because I realized that at one point he will most likely play g4 and g5 and so on. So that's basically what h5 prevents. And I predicted that after queen e2 he probably was going to castle long anyway. So that's why I played h5. Okay, so he played h3, preparing, I suppose, g4 whenever possible, obviously after castles. So I played queen c7. He did castle, and here I played h4. h4 because, well, most likely he was going to play g4. So if g4 now, I can just take the pawn. Okay, f4, bishop d7. And this is something white does quite often. He attacks the e6 pawn in this setup. So it does in some cases tempt black to play something like b5 and put the bishop on b7, but then usually the e6 pawn is under attack, and in some lines white will sacrifice a piece on e6, but then usually at least it's better for black if the bishop would be on f8, because for example if let's say bishop takes, knight takes, well, there's a fork on both the queen and the pawn, and you've probably seen that before. But anyway, it doesn't work here obviously, because now after, for example, let's say f5 in some cases, I can even take the knight on d4. Okay, king b1, I play knight to a5. I did mention f5, but I also have the option to take the bishop on b3 whenever I feel like it. Bishop f2. Well, I'm not quite sure why he did that. Maybe, I don't know why actually. He doesn't actually attack this pawn on h4 because I have my rook protecting the pawn. Okay, well, I don't know. Bishop f2, I played b5. Here he played e5. I play knight takes b3, and there is no in-between move here, of course, because if he takes my knight, I will take his, and then I will be threatening to take his queen as well. So, but apart from the fact that I've already taken a piece. Okay, so c takes b3, d takes e5, f takes e5, knight to h5, rook c1, queen b7, just stepping out of the discovered attack, bishop e3, and here I play knight g3. I did see queen g4, attacking my pawn on g7. First I was kind of tempted to play g6, but on the other hand I do win the exchange up here. I also have the option to take the pawn on g2, but then obviously he would just take my pawn on g7, so that doesn't make any sense. So I chose to take the rook. He took my pawn. And here I played rook f8. I suppose I could have tried, oh actually maybe not. I think castles here would be a mistake perhaps. So I play rook f8, just protecting this pawn, and then when he takes back I can just castle and my pawn on f7 is still protected. Okay, rook c1 again, the discovered attack. I just stepped out of that attack. King b8, knight f3. And here I suppose I was looking at something like bishop to g5, but it's a little bit dangerous for white to do moves like that, because I can even take the pawn on g2, and we can't move the knight or the bishop anywhere. Well, in that case, the knight. Sorry, the bishop, obviously. I mentioned bishop g5 or something like that. But that would also be a silly move, because maybe his queen will be trapped even in the worst case. Okay, bishop c6, attacking this knight twice. So you play queen g4 just to protect the knight, so I took the knight. Bishop takes, pawn takes, and here I play rook g8. Everything is very well protected. This pawn on h4, even though it's not an important pawn, but you don't want to give up anything for. There's no reason for it. So he made actually a mistake here. But now when I'm looking at it, I don't quite see any good options. So, well, I suppose one is to play. Well, he can play queen to h5, or maybe even queen to e4. Either of those moves don't appeal too much, especially when I'm up in an exchange anyway. But he played, well, he just blundered with queen h4. And now to bishop g5, he had to take. And now I have, and here I couldn't really decide what to do, to be honest. I was looking at something like, I don't know, rook d3, or I don't know, just something. Maybe even rook c8, and then when he takes my pawn, I can play b4 and just exchange everything and probably win a bunch of pawns. And also, after rook h8 is it's very passive. I think even rook to d4 was a better move here. But then perhaps he can play something like f4 and just hang in there. It's not as easy as it looks. Yes, I do have a rook and I do have a queen against a knight and a bishop and a rook, but it's not that easy actually, because he does have a bunch of pawns. And it's a little bit difficult to actually win those pawns, especially when he plays f4. But then I suppose f4 is a bad move in itself, because after f4 he can't go with his bishop back to any of these squares. I don't know, I think it's difficult for both players actually, especially at this point. So I'd have to get rid of a couple of pawns, or just force him to do something rather. Okay, but I played rook h8, very passive, I know. Knight to e4, and here I played probably the most passive move of all the moves so far. Rook h5, and now after f4, I don't know what I was thinking. I mean, it is true that pawns are important, but not that important. So obviously the best move here is just to ignore that pawn and play something like rook. Well, no, rook at c8 would be a blunder, because of the takes he has this fork. So it actually is a little bit difficult to find any good moves here. Probably just to leave the rook where it is and play queen to d5. But after rook h5, b4, I do play queen d5. So you can't play f4 now because the knight on d5. Sorry, e4 is hanging. So he played bishop e7. I took the pawn. Yes, I did see the fork, but I didn't care too much about that, because I won a pawn and I'm prepared to give up a pawn anyway. And also I can play at any moment I can play f5 and just kick his knight away. So I didn't mind that. King a7, yes, I did see the check. I play king a8, again a check, king v7. He gave another check, but then after king b6, he's run out of checks, and here he just blundered with knight to c5, and here I overlooked a checkmate in one move, or just this move. But I didn't see that, so I took the bishop, and after rook b7 check, king c6, he just resigned. Well, actually, I think he was probably only had a second left or so. In overall, a good game, quite entertaining. There were a couple of moves, obviously. I mean, in blitz games you can't expect too much. We had the move rook h5, and then of course rook rook h8, not very good or nice looking moves, but sometimes you probably have to do what it takes. But I think rook h5 was completely unnecessary. I could have just left the rook over here and played queen d5 immediately.